$84 trillion is set to change hands over the next 20 years. Whether you're passing it down or inheriting it, the decisions you make today will shape your family's financial future for generations. Welcome to the Great Wealth Transfer, where David Pulcini, CFP, guides you through the strategies, insights, and pitfalls of navigating one of the largest financial shifts in history. What you don't know could redefine your legacy.
One of the true meanings in life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. So think about that for a second. I'm going to bring it back to investing. And most people think about investing in terms of their own retirement, their own goals, and their timeline. But here's the question we're tackling today. What if your money has to outlive you? What if your investment plan isn't just about your income, but your impact, right? So this is the first episode in a 6-part series where we're going to walk through the core areas of financial planning through the lens of the Great Wealth Transfer, which obviously, if we've been watching these, it's the largest movement of wealth in human history, and it's happening right now. So we're going to start with investments because how you grow, how you manage, and eventually transition those assets and those investments will be one of the biggest determinants of how much wealth your family actually keeps, right? So our firm, again, we've talked about this a lot, is named 6 Point for the 6 areas of financial planning. That's investments, retirement income, tax planning, risk management, estate planning, and custom goals. We start with investments because that's the most common of the 6 that people want to talk about first. Most people, when they come to an advisor, they immediately are thinking, my investments, how are my investments doing? They think of that pie chart. How am I investing properly and all of that? So, and by the way, I'm not saying that's right, but that is just the way it is. That's what most people think that we do. And that is part of it, right? It's one of 6 things. So, all right, back to investments through the lens of the Great Wealth Transfer. Most investment portfolios, as you know, if you have an investment account of any kind, it's built for you, for one person, or maybe a couple, okay? But wealth, and we'll talk about that real generational wealth, it doesn't end when you stop needing income. It actually becomes, we'll call it someone else's problem, or I would like to say, as the optimist, right? Someone else's opportunity. But here's the catch. If you've never adjusted your investment strategy for what happens after you're gone, your family could be left with a massive tax bill. They could be left with an inappropriate mix of investments for them, and worse, which we've talked a lot about, is just a pile of confusion, right? So let me give you a real world example. We had a client, we'll call him Bill. Bill he'd done well for himself. He had about $2.5 million, a solid mix of investments for him. And that's important, right? But 70% of it was in IRAs, very common. And he had all of his taxable investments in an individual energy stock that he actually inherited 30 years before. So $2.5 million, most of it in IRAs, pre-tax money. The rest is in one stock that he inherited 30 years ago. So as you know, in 30 years, things can grow and change, right? So his 3 kids, one was a school teacher, one was a surgeon, and one was, we'll call it still figuring life out. So what happens then? The moment they inherited those stocks, 2 of them sold it immediately. And now I'm talking about the after-tax account. The third held on to it and watched the price crash over the next 12 months, okay? The point is, it's the same assets, it's completely different outcomes, and that's the danger of not planning beyond yourself, okay? I'm going to get into how that IRA affected those folks a little bit later, maybe in a different video, but if you're inheriting that much in an IRA and you're making a lot of money, versus somebody who's not making a lot of money, those are 2 totally different outcomes. So that might be some beneficiary planning, some other things that we'll get into later. But let's redefine what investment planning should mean in the context of the Great Wealth Transfer. And I'll tell you what it's not. It's not just, what is my risk tolerance? Or can I retire on 5% withdrawals? Those are the common questions we get, right? Like, how much can I take out? So what I would add to those is, it's also, these are the questions we should be asking. What happens when my kids inherit this portfolio? Number one, will they know what to do with it? And then second, a big deal here is how do I reduce the taxes across the next generation, not just for me? How do I help my kids pay less in taxes? So a few of the core principles behind that are your time horizon. So how long do you have before you are going to need that money? And maybe it's not at all. So when your heirs inherit a Roth IRA or a brokerage account, they often have decades ahead of them. So shouldn't that portfolio, which will probably be theirs, shouldn't it reflect that timeline rather than your own? Okay, that's just something to think about. Another thing here is asset concentration. That one stock or two stocks, it can kill an inheritance. We see it all the time. Clients hold on to one or two stocks for decades, but when their kids inherit it, they might dump them. And why do they do that? It's lack of context, lack of education, and sometimes I'll just call it bad timing. So how many of you, just think of this for yourself, how many of you have a large position in one stock or maybe two stocks? And then think about what will your kids do with that should they inherit it? Okay, and then make a plan for that. And then the other part here is tax location. Huge deal. Again, separate video, but where you hold investments is just as important as what you hold, right? Most people think, hey, if I can get an extra 1%, can you get me an extra 1%? I actually favor the tax location. And what I mean by that is tax efficient investments belong in taxable accounts. Okay, we can go over this later, but an income producing asset typically belongs in a tax deferred account, and your high growth investments, if possible, we want to get them in a Roth if we can get them there, right? High growth in the Roth, tax-free dollars. So let me do this. There's three, I'll call them powerful strategies we use with clients who want to invest with that multi-generational mindset. Number one, we talk about this a lot, Roth conversions. Pay our taxes now at lower brackets, okay? So if we're in especially the 12, 22% brackets, we should be obviously educationally driven and thinking this through, intentionally paying taxes. I know that sounds funny, but let's pay our taxes now at lower brackets, and that potentially saves the kids from inheriting an IRA that has to be drained in 10 years. And most of the time, here's what I find, most of the time when people inherit that IRA that they have to take over 10 years, they are taxed at their peak income levels. Think of your 50, 55-year-olds inheriting the IRA from their parents, right? They're making a bunch of money. They now have to take more out of an IRA. Taxes are going to get them. If we can intentionally pay now, let's do that. Number two, tax loss harvesting and step up in basis planning. I know that that's a lot of jargon there, but if you're holding assets or stocks that have grown, think about how we can maximize the step up in basis, it's called, when you pass away. So I'll leave it there. There are ways to plan around. If you have investments that are after tax that have grown, there are tools out there for legacy planning to make sure your family gets the most out of it. Okay. And then the third one here is let's use the taxable account as a legacy vehicle. I kind of just mentioned that, but for most of you, if the goal isn't to spend everything, it's to build something and pass it on or do something else with it, right? That is not during your lifetime. And taxable accounts with long-term gains can be passed on. There's a reset in basis and used strategically. If that's too much, I apologize. We'll break it down more simply next time. But basically, again, if you have accounts that have grown significantly or even just a little bit and it's after-tax money, okay, you've already paid taxes, gone into an account, and it's growing. Number one, let's make sure it's titled properly. And number two, let's make sure the beneficiaries are correct so that we get that step up in basis, which we've done a different episode on. So let me share, totally separate here, little left turn in this episode, but let me share one of my favorite ideas. Let's say we work with a client who, let's go back to the 3 kids. Before he passes, and I'm using this as a real example because we worked with a gentleman, 3 kids. What if we helped him create a simple video message that walked through his investment plan to explain why he did what he did and why what choices he made and why. So when he passes, his children, they don't just inherit the money, they inherit some clarity, where it came from. They can follow the plan. I know some of you are thinking like, there's no way I'm going to make a video, but maybe we could even write this out. Video is powerful. And actually, I'm going to tell you a story in a second, but now the kids, they kept the investments aligned to the goals. And I would say this, maybe they still meet every single year to review their dad's, in this case, value, because he made it part of the plan. So I was just talking to a gentleman, and he'll know who he is, who sold a portion of his company stock. He worked really hard. He did the grind. He's finally able to cash out some. And when I say cash out some, it was a generous amount, and I'll call it a generational changing amount. He literally said this to me. He said, my kids, their kids, in a Southern accent, and maybe their kids are all set. So I said to him, I said, hey, you should make sure that all of them, I love this, make them watch a video every year before they can have any of your money, especially as those generations get further and further away. They won't know you, right? I've said this before. Can you name your great-great-grandparents? If we're giving them money that's generational wealth, let's make them do something for it, even if it's watching a video once a year, just so they know where it came from. So if it were my kids, it'd be something like, and I would do this obviously separately, but when you inherit money from me, I want you to know where it came from. And then I would explain the history of that. I would tell them, hey, take it slow. Don't make any big moves. And then I'd reiterate that financial freedom is when your money makes more money than you do. I love that. So if you take big chunks out, you can destroy that. If you take big chunks out, your money is not making more money than you do. Let your money make more money than you can. It's a beautiful thing. That is financial freedom. Okay. So let me circle back. The core of this episode. If your investment plan is only built for you, I'll tell you this, it's incomplete. You have worked hard to grow this wealth. Don't let it evaporate because no one knew what to do with it. So again, back to the beginning. This is the first of 6 episodes in the core areas of financial planning series. In the next episode, we're going to talk about retirement income. We have a lot of questions about this and how to avoid running out of money for you. We always want to plan for you first. And then we want to leave behind a legacy that actually makes sense, okay? And the type of accounts that make sense for your beneficiaries. So if you're not sure that your investments are truly built to last beyond you, reach out to us anytime. I'm going to quote myself here, and I'm going to say this. Money is a terrible master, but an excellent servant if it's trained right. So let's train it right. Make it a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Great Wealth Transfer Podcast. If this podcast resonates with you, reach out to 6 Point Financial Partners at 585-485-6048 or email dpulcini at 6pointfp.com.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. Information here is provided in part by third-party sources. These sources are generally deemed to be reliable. However, neither 6 Point Financial Partners, Private Client Services, nor RFG Advisory guarantee the accuracy of third-party sources. The views expressed here are those of 6 Point Financial Partners. They do not necessarily represent those of Private Client Services, RFG Advisory, their employees, or their clients. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by 6 Point Financial Partners or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives through Private Client Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory LLC, RFG Advisory, or RFG. A registered investment advisor. Private Client Services, 6 Point Financial Partners, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.